now a new translation by Simon Armitage of the poem Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, with Samuel West as Sir Gawain and Ian McKellen as the narrator.
Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. It was Christmas at Camelot, King Arthur's court, where the great and the good of the land are gathered. All the righteous lords of the ranks of the Round Table, carousing and revelling in a riot of pleasure. The hubbub of their humour was heavenly to hear. Pleasant dialogue by day and dancing after dusk, so the house and its hall were lit with happiness, and lords and ladies were luminous with joy. Fine folk with their futures before them, there in that hall, their highly honoured king was happiest of all. No nobler knights had come within our castle's wall. With features proud and fine, he stood there tall and straight, a king at Christmas time, amid great merriment. And still he stands there, just being himself, chatting away charmingly, exchanging views. To his left sits Guinevere, then good Sir Gawain, with Agravain the Hard Hand flanking him. Two nephews of the king and notable knights. Flavoursome delicacies of flesh were fetched in, and the freshest of foods. So many, in fact, there was scarcely space to present the stews, or to set the soups in the silver bowls on the cloth. Now on the subject of supper I'll say no more, as it's obvious to everyone that no one went without, because another sound, a new sound, suddenly drew near, the like of which might allow his lordship leave to eat. For barely had the horns finished blowing their breath, and with starters just spooned to the seated guests, a fearful form appeared, framed in the door, a mountain of a man, immeasurably high, a hulk of a human from head to hips, so long and thick in his loins and his limbs, I should genuinely judge him to be a half-giant, or a most massive man, the mightiest of mortals. Amazement seized their minds. No soul had ever seen a knight of such a kind, entirely emerald green. And he kicks on, canters through that crowded hall towards the top table, not the least bit timid, cocksure of himself, sitting high in the saddle.
And who,
he bellows without breaking breath,
is governor of this gathering? I'll be glad to know. It's with him, and him alone, that I'll have my say.
The hall fell hushed as if all who were present had slipped into sleep or some trance-like state. No doubt not all were stunned and stilled by dread, but duty-bound to hold their tongues until their ruler could respond. Then the king acknowledged this curious occurrence, cordially addressed him, keeping his cool.
A warm welcome, sir, this winter's night. My name is Arthur. I am head of this house. Won't you slide from that saddle and stay a while, and the business which brings you here will broach later.
I'm spoiling for no scrap, I swear. Besides, the bodies on these benches are just bum-fluffed bairns. If I'd ridden to your castle rigged out for a ruck, these lightweight adolescents wouldn't last a minute. But it's Yuletide, a time of youthfulness, yes? So at Christmas in this court, I lay down a challenge. If a person here present within these premises is big or bold or red-blooded enough to strike me one stroke and be struck in return, I shall give him as a gift this gigantic cleaver, and the axe shall be his to handle how he likes. I'll kneel, bare my neck, and take the first knock. I'll afford one free hit from which I won't flinch, and promise that 12 months will pass in peace. Then claim the duty I deserve in 1 year and 1 day. Does no one have the nerve to wager in this way?
Then he laughed so loud that their leader saw red. Blood flowed to his fine-featured face, and he raged inside. His men were also hurt. Those words had pricked their pride. But born so brave at heart, the king stepped up one stride.
Your request,
He countered,
is quite insane. And folly finds the man who flirts with the fool. No warrior worth his salt will be worried by your words. So in heaven's good name, hand over the axe, and I'll happily fulfill the favor you ask.
Then Arthur grips the axe, grabs it by its haft, and takes it above him, intending to attack. By Guinevere, Gawain now to his king inclines and says,
I state my claim. This moment must be mine. Call me, courteous lord,
said Gawain to his king,
to rise from my seat and stand at your side. If it pleases, I'll politely take leave of my place, quit without causing offence to my queen, and come to your council before this great court. I am weakest of your warriors, and feeblest of wit. Loss of my life would be grieved the least. Were I not your nephew, my life would mean nothing. To be born of your blood is my body's only claim. And if my proposal is improper, let no other person stand blame.
The fellows then confer, and all assert the same. The king can quit. It's fair to give Gawain the game. In the standing position, he prepared to be struck, bent forward, revealing a flash of green flesh, as he heaped his hair to the crown of his head, the nape of his neck now naked and ready. Gawain grips the axe and heaves it heavenwards, plants his left foot firmly on the floor in front, then swings it swiftly towards the bare skin. The cleanness of the strike cleaved the spinal cord and parted the fat and the flesh so far that the bright steel blade took a bite from the floor. The handsome head tumbles onto the earth, and the king's men kick it as it clatters past. Blood gutters brightly against his green gown, yet the man doesn't shudder or stagger or sink, but trudges towards them on those tree-trunk legs and rummages around, reaches at their feet and cops hold of his head and hoists it high and strides to his steed, snatches the bridle, steps into the stirrup and swings into the saddle, still gripping his own head by a handful of hair. Then he settles himself in his seat with the ease of a man unmarked, never mind being minus his head. And when he wheeled about, his bloody neck still bled. His point was proved. The court was deadened now with dread. For that scalp and skull now swung from his fist, towards the top table he turned the face, and it opened its eyelids, stared straight ahead, and spoke this speech, which you'll hear for yourselves.
Sir Gawain, be wise enough to keep your word, and faithfully follow me until I'm found, as you vowed in this hall, within hearing of these horsemen. You're charged with getting to the Green Chapel to reap what you've sown. You'll rightfully receive the justice you are due, just as January dawns. Men know my name as the Green Chapel Knight, and even a fool couldn't fail to find me, so come, or be called the coward forever!
With a tug of the reins, he twisted around, and head still in hand, galloped out of the hall, so the hooves brought fire from the flame in the flint. Which kingdom he came from, they hadn't a clue, no more than they knew where he made for next. And then, well, with the green man gone, they laughed and grinned again, and yet such goings-on were magic to those men. So in peril and pain Sir Gawain made progress, crisscrossing the countryside until Christmas Eve. Then, at that time of tiding, he prayed to highest heaven, let Mother Mary guide him towards some house or haven. No sooner had he signed himself 3 times, he became aware in those woods of high walls in a moat, on a mound, bordered by the boughs of thick-trunked timber which trimmed the water, the most commanding castle a knight ever kept, in the midst of tall trees for 2 miles or more. Then he girded Gringolet with his gilded spurs, and purely by chance chose the principal approach to the building which brought him to the end of the bridge. Then a notion occurred to that noble knight to inveigle a visit, get invited inside, to be hosted and housed, and all holy days remain. A pleasant porter came, a watchman on the wall, who greeted Sir Gawain.
Good morning.
Said our man.
Will you bear a message to the owner of this hall and ask him for shelter?
Nice and Peter.
Said the porter.
It'll be my pleasure.
He was assisted from the saddle by several men, and the strongest among them stabled his steed. Then knights and the squires of knights drew near to escort him with courtesy into the castle. Then the master of the manor emerged from his chamber, saying,
Behave in my house as your heart pleases. Here you are welcome to all you want. Do what you will.
Grant mercy.
Gawain said.
May Christ reward you well.
And firmly, like old friends, they hugged and held a while. Gawain gazed at the lord who greeted him so gracefully, the great one who governed that grand estate, powerful and large in the prime of his life, with a bushy beard as red as a beaver's, steady in his stance, solidly built, with a fiery face but fine conversation, a man quite capable, it occurred to Gawain, of keeping such a castle and captaining his knights. Once dinner was done, Gawain drew to his feet, and darkness neared as day became dusk. Chaplains went off to the castle's chapels to sound the bells hard, to signal the hour of evensong, summoning each and every soul. The lord goes alone. Then his lady arrives, concealing herself in a separate closet. Gawain attends too. Tugged by his sleeve, he is steered to a seat, led by the lord, who greets Gawain by name as his guest. No man in the world is more welcome, are his words. For that he is thanked. And they hug there and then, and sit as a pair through the service in prayer. Then she who desired to see the stranger came from her closet with her sisterly crew. She was fairest amongst them, her face, her flesh, the colour of her skin, the contours of her shape, more glorious than Guinevere, or so Gawain thought. And in the chancel of the church they exchanged courtesies. They drank and danced all day, and the next, and danced and drank the day after that. Then St. John's Day passed with a gentler joy, as the Christmas feasting came to a close. Gawain offered his goodbyes, but was ushered by his host to his host's own chamber and the heat of its chimney. At length his lordship tried to get his guest to stay, but proud Gawain replied he must now make his way. Then the lord, being curious, made a courteous inquiry of what dare or deed in the depth of winter should coax him from Camelot so quickly and alone, before Christmas was over in his king's court.
What you ask,
said the knight,
you shall now know. A most pressing matter prized me from that place. I myself am summoned to seek out a site whose mapless location is a mystery to me. By the year's first day I must find it, and not fail for all the acres in England. So help me, Lord. And in speaking of my quest, I respectfully request that you tell me in truth if you have heard the tale of a green chapel, or the grounds where a green chapel stands, or the guardian of those grounds, who is coloured green. For I am bound by a bond, agreed by us both, to locate him there, should I live that long. In 3 short days my destiny is due, and I would rather drop dead than duck from duty.
Then, laughing out loud, the lord said,
Relax. I'll direct you to your rendezvous when the time is right. You'll get to the Green Chapel. Stop giving yourself grief. You can bask in your bed, bide your time, save your fond farewells till the 1st of the month, and still meet him by mid-morning to do as you may. So stay. The place you need is near, 2 miles at most away. You relax as you like. Lie in your bed until mass tomorrow, then go to your meal where my wife will be waiting, and she will sit at your side to accompany and comfort you in my absence from court. You lounge. At dawn, I'll rise and ride to hunt with horse and hound.
The gracious knight agreed, and bending low, he bowed.
Furthermore,
said the master,
let's make a pact. Here's a wager. What I win in the woods will be yours, and what you gain while I'm gone, you will give to me. Young sir, let's swap and strike a bond. Let a bargain be a bargain, for worse or for better.
By God,
said Gawain,
I agree to the terms, and I find it pleasing that you favour such fun.
Let drink be served, and we'll seal the deal.
So through a lime leaf border the lord led the hunt, while snug in his sheets lay slumbering Gawain, dozing as the daylight dappled the walls, under a splendid cover enclosed by curtains. And while snoozing he heard a stealthy sound, the sigh of a door swinging slowly aside. From below the bedding he brings up his head and lifts the corner of the curtain a little, wondering warily what it might be. It was she, the lady, looking her loveliest, was quietly and craftily closing the door, nearing the bed. So he stirred and stretched, turned on his side, lifted his eyelids, and, looking alarmed, quickly signed himself with his hand as if saving his life. Her pale white chin, her cheeks all ruddy red with health, her small, sweet smile. She speaks with lips that love to laugh.
Morning's greetings, Sir Gawain,
said the graceful lady.
You sleep so soundly one might sidle in here.
She giggled girlishly as she teased good Gawain. The man in the bed said,
Good morning, ma'am. I'm happy to attend to whatever task you ask, and in serving your desires I shall seek your mercy, which seems my best plan in the circumstances.
She glanced at him, laughed, and gave her good-bye, then stood and stunned him with astounding words.
May the Lord repay you for your prize performance, but I know that Gawain could never be your name.
But why not?
Asked the knight, in need of an answer, afraid that some fault in his manners had failed him.
A good man like Gawain, so greatly regarded, the embodiment of courtliness to the bones of his being, could never have lingered so long with a lady without craving a kiss, as politeness requires, or coaxing a kiss with his closing words.
Very well,
said Gawain.
Let's do as you wish. If a kiss is your request, I shall keep my promise to faithfully fulfill you. So ask no further.
The lady comes close, cradles him in her arms, leans nearer and nearer, then kisses the knight. Then they courteously commend one another to Christ, and without one more word the woman is away. And the lord of the land still led the hunt, driving hinds to their death through holts and heaths, and by the setting of the sun had slaughtered so many of the does and other deer that it beggared belief. Then hauling their meat, they headed for home, and as daylight died, they had covered the distance and were back in the abode where Gawain sat, biding his time. Warm friends, Warm flames will meet the huntsman's home return. Gawain as well will greet his host. Bright hearth fires burn. Then the whole of the household was ordered to the hall, and the women as well with their maids in waiting. In front of those folk on the floor, he instructs that the venison be revealed in view of the crowd. And in excellent humour he hollered for Gawain to see for himself the size of the kill, and showed him the side slabs, sliced from the ribs.
Are you pleased with this pile? Have I won your praise? Does my skill at this sport deserve your esteem?
Why, yes,
said the other.
it's the hugest haul I've seen out of season for several years.
And I give you it, Gawain.
The great lord said.
For according to our contract, it is yours to claim.
Just so,
Said Gawain.
and I'll say the same. For whatever I've won within these walls, such gains will be graciously given to you.
So he held out his arms and hugged the lord, and kissed him in the kindliest way he could.
You're welcome to my winnings, to my one profit, though I'd gladly have given you any greater prize.
I'm grateful.
Said the lord.
Dan Gawain, this gift would carry more worth if you cared to confess by what wit you won it, and when and where.
That wasn't our pact,
He replied.
so don't pry. You'll be given nothing greater. The agreement we have holds good.
They laugh aloud and trade wise words which match their mood. When supper's meal is made, they dine on dainty food. Later they lounged by the lord's fire, and were served unstintingly with subtle wines, and agreed to the game again next morning, and to play by the rules already in place. Any takings to be traded between the two men, no matter what the merchandise, at night when they met. By the third cackle of the crowing cock, the lord and his liegemen are leaping from their beds, and mass and the morning meal are taken, and riders are rigged out ready to run as day dawns. They leave the levels loud with howling hunting horns. The huntsmen loose the hounds through thickets and through thorns. Soon they pick up a scent at the side of a swamp. The biggest of wild boars has bolted from his cover. The front men stepped forward to fire a shot, aimed arrows at him and hit him often, but their points couldn't pierce his impenetrable shoulders, and bounced away from his bristly brow. So the day was spent in pursuits of this style, while our lovable young lord hadn't left his bed, and cosseted in costly quilted covers there he remained. The lady at first light does not neglect Gawain, but goes to greet the knight, and means to change his mind. She approaches the curtains, parts them, and peeps in, at which Sir Gawain welcomes her at once, and with prompt speech she replies to the prince, settling by his side and giggling sweetly, looking at him lovingly before launching her words.
If this is Gawain who greets me, I am galled that a man so dedicated to doing his duty cannot heed the first rule of honourable behaviour, which has entered through one ear and exited the other. You have lost what only yesterday you listened to and learned in the truest lesson my tongue could teach.
What lesson?
Asked the knight.
I know of none, though if a crime has occurred, then correct me, of course.
I encouraged you to kiss.
The lady said kindly.
And to claim one quickly when one is required. An act which ennobles any knight worth the name.
Dear woman,
Said Gawain.
don't utter such words. I dare not kiss in case I am declined. If refused, I'd be at fault for presuming in the first place.
In truth,
She told him.
you cannot be turned down. If someone was so snooty as to snub your advance, a man like you has the means of his muscles.
Yes, by God,
Said Gawain.
what you say holds good. But such heavy-handedness is frowned on in my homeland, and so is any gift not given with grace. What kiss you request I will courteously supply. Have what you want or hold off, whichever the case.
So bending from above, the fair one kissed his face. The two then talk of love, its grief, also its grace. The kill was blown on many blaring bugle, and the unhurt hunters hollered and whooped. So with the swine swinging they swagger home, bearing the boar's head before that huntsman who had fought with his fists in the ford till the beast was slain. The day then dragged, it seemed, before he found Gawain, who comes when called most keen to countenance the claim.
Now, Gawain,
said the lord,
I give you this game as our wager warranted, as well you remember.
Certainly,
said Sir Gawain.
It shall be so, and graciously I shall give you my gains in exchange.
He catches him by the neck and courteously kisses him, then a second time kisses him in a similar style. They supped and swapped stories and spoke again of the night to come next, which was New Year's Eve. Gawain pleaded politely to depart by morning, so in 2 days' time he might honour his treaty. But the lord was unswerving, insisting that he stayed.
As an honest soul, I swear on my heart, you shall find the Green Chapel to finalize your affairs by dawn on New Year's Day without a shadow of doubt.
So those gentlemen agreed that Gawain would not go, and they took more drink, then by torchlight retired to their beds. Our man then sleeps, a most reposed and peaceful rest. As hunters must, his host is up at dawn and dressed. The fields were dazzling, fixed with frost, and the crown of sunrise rose scarlet and crimson, scalding and scattering cloud from the sky. At the fringe of the forest the dogs were set free, and the rumpus of the horns went ringing through the rocks. They fall on the scent of a fox and follow, turning and twisting as they sniff out the trail. So his lordship and his lords were merrily led in this manner through the mountains till mid-afternoon, while our handsome hero snoozed contentedly at home, kept from the cold of the morning by curtains. But love would not let her ladyship sleep, and the fervour she felt in her heart would not fade. She comes into his quarters and closes the door, makes her way to the window and throws it open, and sweet and swift is the speech he intends for his ear.
Ah, sir, you sleep, it seems, yet morning comes so clear.
And though his dreams are deep, he cannot help but hear. Sensing her presence there, he surfaces from sleep, drags himself out of his dreams to address her. Laughing warmly, she walks towards him and finds his face with the friendliest kiss. In a worthy style he welcomes the woman, and seeing her so lovely and alluringly dressed, every feature so faultless, her complexion so fine, a passionate heat takes hold in his heart.
But I shall not succumb,
he swore to himself. With affectionate laughter he fenced and deflected all the loving phrases which leapt from her lips. She offers him a ring of rich red gold, and the stunning stone set upon it stood proud, beaming and burning with the brightness of the sun. What wealth it was worth you can well imagine. But he would not accept it, and said straight away,
By God, no tokens will I take at this time. I have nothing to give, so nothing will I gain.
Snubbed by his decision, she said to him then,
You refuse my ring because you find it too fine, and don't dare to be deeply indebted to me. So I give you my girdle, a lesser thing to gain.
From around her body she unbuckled the belt, which tightened the tunic beneath her topcoat. A green silk girdle trimmed with gold, exquisitely edged and hemmed by hand. And she sweetly beseeched Sir Gawain to receive it, in spite of its slightness, and hoped he would accept. But still he maintained he intended to take neither gold nor girdle until, by God's grace, the challenge he had chosen was finally achieved.
And now he sends back my silk.
The lady responded.
So simple in itself, or so it appears. So little and unlikely, worth nothing or less. But a knight who knew of the power knitted in it would pay a high price to possess it, probably. For the body which is bound within this green belt, as long as it is buckled robustly about him, will be safe against those who seek to strike him. And all the slyness on earth wouldn't see him slain.
The man mulled it over, and it entered his mind that this girdle being given could be just the job to save him from the chop in his challenge at the chapel. With luck, it might let him escape with his life. His thanks are heartfelt, then. No sooner can he say how much it matters when 3 kisses come his way. Now the lord of the land was still leading his men, finishing off the fox he had followed for so long. And at last the lord lands at his lovely home, to find by the heat of the fireside his friend, the good Sir Gawain, in glad spirits on account of the company he had kept with the ladies. He meets the master in the middle of the room, greets him graciously with Gawain, saying,
I shall first fulfill our formal agreement which we fixed in words when the drink flowed freely.
He clasps him tight and kisses him 3 times, with as much emotion as a man could muster.
By the Almighty,
said the master,
you must have had luck to profit such a prize, if the price was right.
Oh, fiddlesticks to the fee,
said the other fellow.
As long as I have given the goods which I gain.
By Mary,
said the master.
Mine's a miserable match. I've hunted for hours with nothing to my name but this foul, stinking fox. Fling its fur to the devil.
And with meals, mirth, and minstrelsy, they made as much amusement as any mortal could. And among those merry men and laughing ladies, Gawain and his host got giddy together. Only lunatics and drunkards could have looked more delirious. And later, in the hall, humbly to his host, our knight says good night, and renews his gratitude. By tapering torchlight he was taken to his room, and brought to his bunk to bed down and rest. But if our knight sleeps soundly, I couldn't say, for the matter in the morning might be meddling with his thoughts. So let him lie and think, in sight of what he's sought. In time I'll tell if tricks work out the way they ought. Now night passes and New Year draws near, drawing off darkness as our deity decrees. But wild-looking weather was about in the world. Clouds decanted their cold rain earthwards. The nithering north needled man's very nature. Creatures were scattered by the stinging sleet. Then a whip-cracking wind comes whistling between hills, driving snow into deepening drifts in the dales. Alert and listening, Gawain lays in his bed. His lids are lowered, but he sleeps very little as each crow of the cock brings his destiny closer. Before day had dawned, he was up and dressed, for the room was lightened by the light of a lamp. And he did not leave off the lady's lace girdle for his own good. Gawain won't forget that gift. The drawbridge was dropped, and the double-fronted gates were unbarred, and each half was heaved wide open. With a wrench on the reins, he reeled around, and heel-kicked the horse as hard as he could, galloped away, and was gone. Then he presses ahead, picks up a path which brings him past a boulder near a brambly thicket, then by and by to the bottom of a gorge, where he wanders and watches. It looks a wild place. He heels the horse, heads for that mound, grounds himself gracefully, and tethers gringily, looping the reins to the limb of a lime. Then he strides forward and circles the feature, baffled as to what that bizarre hill could be. It had a hole at one end, and at either side, and its walls, matted with weeds and moss, enclosed a cavity like a kind of old cave or crevice in the crag. It was all too unclear to declare.
Green church,
chunters the knight.
More like the devil's lair, where at the knell of night he makes his morning prayer.
With his head helmeted and his lance in his hand, he scrambled to the skylight of that strange abyss. Then he heard, on the hillside, from behind a hard rock, and beyond the brook, a blood-chilling noise.
My God!
cried Gawain.
That grinding is a greeting. My arrival is honoured with the honing of an axe up there. Then let the Lord decide. Oh well, won't help me here. I might well lose my life, but freak sounds hold no fear.
Then Gawain called as loudly as his lungs would allow.
Who has power in this place to honour his pact?
The Green Knight spoke.
God guard you, Gawain. Welcome to my world after all your wandering. Pull your helmet from your head and take what you're owed.
No,
said good Gawain.
by my life-giving God, I won't gripe or begrudge the grimness to come. So keep to one stroke and I'll stand stock still. Won't whisper a word of unwillingness, or one complaint.
He bowed to take the blade, and bared his neck and nape. But loath to look afraid, he feigned a fearless state. Suddenly the Green Knight summons up his strength, hoists the axe over Gawain's head, lifts it aloft with every fibre of his life, and begins to bring home a bone-splitting blow. But glimpsing the axe at the edge of his eye, bringing death earthwards as it arced through the air, and sensing its sharpness, Gawain shrank at the shoulders. The swinging axeman swerved from his stroke, and reproached the young prince with piercing words.
Call yourself good Sir Gawain?
He goaded.
Never have I known such a namby-pamby knight.
Gawain confessed.
I flinched at first, but will not fail. Though once my head's unhitched, it's off once and for all.
Take this, then,
said the other, throwing up the axe, menacing the young man with the gaze of a maniac. Then he launches his swing, but leaves him unscathed, withholds his arm before harm could be done, and Gawain was motionless, never moved a muscle, but stood stone still, or as still as a tree stump anchored in the earth by 100 roots. Then the warrior in green mocked Gawain again.
Now you've plucked up your courage. I'll dispatch you properly. May the honourable knighthood heaped on you by Arthur, if it proves to be powerful, protect your pretty neck.
Hoisted and aimed, the axe hurtled downwards, a ferocious blow. But far from being fatal, it skewed to one side, just skimming the skin and finally snicking the fat of the flesh, so that bright red blood shot from body to earth.
Enough swiping, sir. You've swung your last swing. I've borne one blow without bottling out. Go for me again and you'll get some by return. With interest. Hit out and be hit in an instant and hard.
Be a mite less feisty, fearless young fellow. No insulting or heinous incident has happened beyond the contract agreed in the court of your king. Had I mustered all my muscles into one mega blow, my axe would have dealt you your death without doubt. But my first strike fooled you, a feint, no less, not fracturing your flesh, which was only fair in keeping with the contract we declared that first night. For with truthful behaviour, you honoured my trust and gave up your gains as a good man should. Then I missed you once more, and this for the morning when you kissed my pretty wife, then kindly kissed me. So twice you were truthful, therefore twice I left no scar. The person who repays will live to feel no fear. The third time, though, you strayed and felt my blade, therefore. Because the belt you are bound with belongs to me. It was woven by my wife, so I know it very well. And I know of your courtesies and conduct and kisses and the wooing of my wife, for it was all my work. I sent her to test you. And in truth, it turns out you're by far the most faultless fellow on earth. But a little thing more. It was loyalty that you lacked, not because you're wicked or a womanizer or worse, but much less of a crime. You loved your own life.
Gawain stood speechless for what seemed like a century, and the fire of his blood brought flames to his face, and he wriggled and writhed at the other man's words. Then he grabbed the girdle and ungathered its knot, and flung it in fury at the man in front.
My downfall and undoing. Let the devil take it.
As I feared, I am found to be flawed and false. Through treachery and untruth, I have totally failed.
The Green Lord laughed and leniently replied,
By confessing your failings, you are free from fault. And this gold-hemmed girdle I present as a gift, which is green like my gown. But follow me home. New Year's far from finished. We'll resume our revelling with supper and song.
Thank you,
said the bare-headed knight,
but I think not.
and with helmet in hand he offered his thanks.
I've loitered long enough. But the girdle,
Said Gawain,
God bless you for this gift. When my pulse races with passion and pride, one look at this Lovelace will lessen my heart. But I will ask one thing, if it won't offend. Will you make known your name? And I'll ask nothing else.
Then I'll treat you to the truth.
told him.
Here, in my homelands, they call me Bertilac de Haute Desert.
So they clasped and kissed, and made kindly commendations to the Prince of Paradise, and then parted in the cold, that pair. Our man back on his mount now hurtles home from there. The Green Knight leaves his ground to wander who knows where. So he winds through the wilds of the world once more, Gawain on Gringolet, by the grace of God, and safe and sound he sets foot in court. Once the nobles knew of the knight's return, happiness cannoned through the echoing halls. The king kissed his kinsman, and so did the queen. And Gawain was embraced by his band of brothers, who made eager inquiries, and he answered them all with the tale of his trial and tribulations, and the challenge of the chapel, and the great green chap, and the love of the lady which led to the belt.
Regard,
Said Gawain, grabbing the girdle.
Through this I suffered a scar to my skin. For my loss of faith I was physically defaced. What a coveting coward I became, it would seem. I was tainted by untruth, and this, its token. I will drape across my chest till the day I die. For man's crimes can be covered, but never made clean. Once entwined with sin, man is twinned for all time.
The king gave comfort, then laughter filled the castle, and in friendly accord the company of the court allowed that each lord belonging to their order, every knight in the brotherhood, should bear such a belt, a bright green belt, worn obliquely to the body, as a mark of respect, and in memory of this man. So that slanting green stripe was adopted as their sign, and each knight who held it was honoured forever, as all meaningful writings on romance remind us. An adventure which happened in the era of Arthur. And ever since Brutus gave birth to the British, once the siege and assault and slaughter at Troy had ceased, our coffers have been crammed with stories such as these. Now let our Lord, thorn-crowned, bring us to perfect peace. Amen.
In Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, translated by Simon Armitage, Ian McKellen was the narrator, Sir Gawain played by Samuel West, the Green Knight and Bertilac by David Fleischman, Deborah McAndrew was Lady Bertilac, and Conrad Nelson played Arthur and the Porter. The music was composed by Gary Yershon and performed by Tapestry of Music and Clifford Lantaff. Sir Gawain and the Green Knight was produced in Manchester by Susan Roberts.